I'm going to look at an add-on called Universal Content Puller. Before we go into the edit dialog and dashboard pages, we'll have a look at a system diagram to get some idea of what Universal Content Puller is all about. Universal Content Puller is a workflow application that pulls content from a source, transforms that content, and then displays the content. We have multiple options for the source, from stacks, areas of other pages, URLs, files, loads of different sources, loads of transforms. They can do things like turn Markdown into HTML, turn a CSV into a table, turn JSON data into a table or a multiple level list, extract parts of an XML feed. A whole bunch of different things you can do with the transform. And then display, we can decide to display something directly or as a table or as a multi-level list, or we can just dump it as a data dump to the display. Within all that, some displays can be paginated. We can pull directly or Ajax it, and we can use the Concrete 5 cache. Let's have a quick look at the dashboard pages. This is under stacks and blocks because Universal Content Puller is primarily a block. Let's get stacks and blocks properly. Here we have Universal Content Puller. I'll just hide that dialog. And here we have our content sources, things like pulling from another page, pulling from a stack, pulling from the parent of a page, pulling from the child of a page, pulling from a file, pulling from a URL. Transforms, we can pass through directly. We can select part of the source using a CSS selector. We can select a multi-dimensional extract from the source using nested levels of selector. We can turn a CSV into a table, or get a table from HTML or from JSON, from text lines. And then when it comes to displaying, we can display it straight through. We can turn it into paragraphs with a heading at the top. We can output a multiple level of list, that's lists within lists within lists. We can display tables, we can just serialize it as a data dump. We can embed the data as a script element in the page. And all of this is expandable to show some built-in documentation. So you have this on the site that you install Universal Content Puller with. The other thing we have is a section called Global Settings. Global settings are what you see in the block edit dialog, preset in the dashboard. And these are the settings that when you create a new Universal Content Puller block, it will default to whatever settings you have set up here. Let's go back to the page and we'll show you an example. What we have here is a sidebar of the Universal Content Puller documentation page. Now, if we want this sidebar to appear on every page of Universal Content Puller, we can't really make it a global area because we've also got other pages on the site to consider. What we want is some sort of limited regional global area. We could do that with page templates, or we could use Universal Content Puller. So if we go to a few other pages within Universal Content Puller, you will see this sidebar replicated. Let's go to the common sidebar page. You don't actually need this page to see the sidebar replicated, but it's got a bit of text on it about things. And we'll actually have a look at how Universal Content Puller is set up here. So here we are in the edit mode. I'll edit the block. And here you have the Universal Content Puller edit dialog looks a bit like what we just saw on the dashboard page. For a content source, we're looking at the parent area, and if I click that, we have a selector for the different content sources which we can read more about if we want to. I'm not going to change that. We're going to pull ancestor from the top. Now if you think, the page structure here is the home page, then an add-ons page, and then the specific add-on, Universal Content Puller. So that is 2 pages down from the top. So we could use this same block anywhere on the site and it would pull the relevant sidebar for a particular add-on section of the site. We're pulling the sidebar, and because it contains navigation data, we want to pull it in the context of the source page, which means any navigation is evaluated with respect to the page that it's pulled from, not the page it's pulled into. We're going to pull the whole sidebar. We could just pull a few blocks off the sidebar, but we're going to leave it at that at the moment. And we have here a block filter. We could filter by block type or by block name. We're not going to filter the blocks at all. Having pulled that parent area, I'm going to use the selector transform. And what we're going to do is remove any container and row classes on elements in that area. Because if you start putting containers within a narrow sidebar, you end up breaking the box of the sidebar. To display it, we're just going to pass it through. Plain display. And then the final part, we're not going to Ajax load it. At the moment we're not going to cache it, but we could. We're not going to sanitize it in any way. We're not going to auto link URLs in any way. This is trusted content. This is content from our own site, so we can just leave it alone. All we're going to do is wrap it in a div with the class UCP body, just to put a box around it. And we're not going to have any marker in edit mode. We're just going to leave it there. So let's cancel the edit dialog and go back, and there is our sidebar, complete with notes about how the sidebar was pulled from the parent page. Let's have a look at another example. Let's have a look at an RSS feed. This is about as different as you can get from a sidebar. What we have here is a page that's pulling the NASA news feed and showing it in different ways. We've got all the basic data, we've got some shuffled data, we've got the titles stripped out or subheadings, and then we've got it nicely formatted. Let's go through these one by one. We'll start by having a quick look at the source data from NASA. So there's NASA's RSS feed, and bits we're interested in is channel. It's a wrapper for the overall content of the channel, and then within that there's a number of items. We look at the RSS, and then within each item there's links, descriptions, and enclosure, which is the image that we want to show, and a few other bits of information. Place our page in edit mode to create this RSS feed, or it could be any XML data that you want to do something with. We're using the URL source, and there is the NASA breaking news URL. To transform it, we'll use a multi-selector, which looks at selectors within selectors within selectors within selectors to any level you like. Our source is XML. We're looking at the channel part of that XML, and within that channel we want all the items, and within each item we want everything. So create a level that's blank and it'll look at all children. We're not going to exclude anything explicitly, and what we want is the text from that child and named attributes: URL, source, type, title, alt. Stuff that tends to be attributes of items in a feed rather than the item itself. We're going to get up to 25 items from the feed. To display it, we're going to display it as a multi-level list. The top level is going to be paragraphs, and the heading is going to be the first child value, which happens to be the title of each post in the RSS. At the next level, we're going to go for a horizontal definition list, just so you can see what the various items are, and we're going to capitalize the keys of that list. That's the names of the items, the tags in the RSS. And we're going to filter out a few things we don't want. The first item, or the title, we're going to get rid of because we've just shown it above. The source, we don't want the full URL of that, and a few other bits that would just clutter up our information. And if we come out, here we have the title, the link, the description, the enclosure URL, which is a URL to an image, the publication date, and the source URL. And here's the first item in the feed, here's the second item in the feed. And we're also showing it paginated, which I didn't show you last time, but we'll come on to in a minute. Here's a variation where we've shuffled the order of things. And if we look at the display here, what's been added is a shuffle to put publication date first, then description, then enclosure, and then link. So publication, description, enclosure, and link. Our third variation of this block has taken out the titles. So let's look at how that's done. What we've done now is change that from a definition list to paragraphs and the title to none. Because we don't have a title, we have to list the paragraphs by number, and these start at 1 for convenience, not a 0 programming offset, but at 1. And we've also had to change the shuffle to put the publication date at the top, because it's the fourth of the filtered paragraphs. If you want a clue as to how this works, if we go to the number view and save that briefly, here we can see item 1, the description, item 4 was the publication, item 2 was the image, item 3 is the source URL. I'll edit the block and put that back again. There we go. Let's have a look at the fourth variation of this. What we've done here is to add some style. Let's look at the block itself first. We have the paragraphs as before. We've got a shuffle order where it's similar to before, but what I've done is I've put the image first, and then the publication date, and then the description. And while we're here, I'll just show you that pagination has been enabled, and it's been enabled without restricting it to a particular block. We haven't included the block identity in the pagination, which means this paginator that's attached will work for all blocks on the page similarly. So every single RSS feed will be on the same page. Because it's the same RSS feed, we don't want to confuse what you're looking at. And if we go to the advanced tab, another thing to show is here we're keeping a safe output, but we're adding an auto linker, and we're pulling in an image with no specific constraints. We're just going to show whatever image they give us. I'll come out of edit mode and discard changes because I don't want to mess things up. We'll come back to this and look at the rendered view. What I've actually done to style this, having got them into the order I want, is added a little header extra content attribute. And here we have, at the second level, the first item is floated right with the margin left. That's the image, and the image within that has given a maximum width of 200 pixels. So these styles push the image over here. This style, second item in the second level, is for the date and time. So there's the date time, and this final one refers to the title, and it's basically adding a clear fix to the title so that the float right doesn't interfere with what's sitting beneath it. You don't have to go through all these steps on the same page. You'd aim for just whatever you want to do with an RSS feed. So here's an RSS feed with images shown and a bit of formatting with no programming apart from adding a little bit of CSS to the top of the page. Universal Content Puller pulls the feed, it paginates the feed, it can cache the feed if you want it to, and you've got control over how you format it. And here's the paginator. Let's go to page 2. And here we are looking at the next page of NASA's feed with several different views of it because we've got several different UCP blocks on the page here. Let's have a look at some CSV data. Supposing we want to pull some data from somewhere. Now here we have some CSV data. This is the raw data pulled into the page using Universal Content Puller with nothing but a new line to break transform to push it onto separate lines, make it look presentable. So here's our raw data and we want to display this, and here's the same data displayed using Universal Content Puller. So let's edit the UCP block. Our source is URL and it's actually this URL. Because the original source went down the page and we want to do something, we're transforming it as a table from CSV data, and we're transposing the rows and columns that make the data go across the page rather than down the page. In the display, we're displaying it as a table. The row has the first column as its heading and the column has the first row as its heading. Because we're using them as headings, we filtered them out from the actual display. We're not paginating, but we are adding some stripes and things. These are standard bootstrap. So if we exit now, here is our data as a table. We could do more, we could filter out more rows, we could add conditional filtering, we can add a bit more style and things, but that's pretty much it. Further down we've got the same data presented using a multi-level list. And we saw the multi-level list with the RSS feed just now, so we won't go into that further. The last thing I'm going to show you is exactly the same stuff but Ajax loaded. Now Ajax loading is just an option you pick on the advanced tab of the UCP edit dialog. Here we're pulling some content blocks from another page, not the whole page, just a slice of the content blocks, which is actually from the advanced tab of Universal Content Puller, the documentation page for that talks about the Ajax options. So if we pull that in here, the options, well, you could have no Ajax at all, i.e. directly render the content. It could load immediately after a time delay, as it scrolls into view or gets close to scrolling into view, when visible, which is what I'd normally do within a tab sit or accordion. But here we've done it when the placeholder is clicked, purely so you can see the load happening, or on an event. This will just not load at all until some JavaScript tells it to. And it's up to you to write the JavaScript if you want to use this option. So let's close that bit of the accordion. Here's our RSS feed. Again, it's the NASA feed. It's the feed that we had on the other page. All I've done is change the option to Ajax load it and turned off the pagination. So here's our NASA data. And the final one is showing magic tabs rendering within an Ajax load of another section of this site that's one of the documentation pages for magic tabs. So there we go, and we've loaded up some tabs. Tab memory was on, so we're seeing the tab that I looked at last, which was the interaction one. I won't go into details of that, but what I'll just do is show you Ajaxing on thing. We've used a placeholder on the display purely to keep the edit dialog manageable. If we edit that last one that's pulling in the magic tabs, if we look at the advanced part of it, Ajax load when a placeholder is clicked. We've got a placeholder which is just an outline around an area of the page. We control the height of that outline, and we have control of the message that we put in it. We haven't got any cache enabled because caching and Ajax can give unexpected results. Important here is because the content we're pulling in from the magic tabs page is tabbed, and therefore there's JavaScript in it, we don't want to sanitize it at all. We want to pull it in complete with script. We're not going to auto link anything, and the rest of that is pretty much left alone. So the key important thing here is just changing that to Ajax load when placeholder clicked. Option here for an Ajax thing within some tabs would probably be to Ajax load when it becomes visible, i.e. when that tab is opened, it'll Ajax load it. Now let's go back again. Here we are, and Ajax loading a bunch of tabs. There are a few tricks about Ajax loading tabs. You need to watch the tab continuity very carefully and make sure you get tabs nesting correctly. But that's not something we'll go into in depth here. So let's go back to the starting point and our system diagram. We've looked at a bunch of content sources, a bunch of content transforms, and a bunch of content displays. We've paginated it. We've done some of it with Ajax. Some of them were cached, some of them weren't. And these are all extendable. And I have plans for further sources, further transforms, further displays. Contact me through support if you are wondering whether Universal Content Puller can help with your particular application. And it might be able to help directly, or if you need some help putting together an extra source or transform or display, I can help you with that as well.